Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. Today we're going to be talking about the mysterious disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. Now, if you live in the US, there's probably a chance you've heard of this one before. From what I can gather, this was a really big case back in the US when this first happened. Me being from the UK, I'd never heard of this one before, so I know you guys like when I do the really obscure, strange mysteries that you've probably never heard of. You may have heard of this one before, but that's okay because it's got so many twists and turns, and I think it's really important to keep talking about this case because there's still a chance that Jennifer could be found. Jennifer Kesse was just 24 years old when she disappeared without a trace from Orlando, Florida on January 24th, 2006. She was 5'8", she weighed between 125 to 130 pounds, she had blonde hair, blue eyes, and was a Caucasian female. So like I said, this is a crazy interesting case with tons of twists and turns in it. I feel like this is going to be a long video. Of course, I am going to miss some things out, whether intentionally or unintentionally. I can't talk about everything. I usually find in the more well-known cases I get a lot of people in the comments like, you missed this and you missed this, and like I'm usually aware that I've missed them. But of course, if I have missed a few things out, please feel free to write kindly in the comments down below. So the weekend before Jennifer went missing, she had been on holiday vacation with her boyfriend to St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. Her boyfriend Rob was an Englishman who lived about 200 miles away from her home in Orlando in Fort Lauderdale. So they had a long distance relationship. From what I can gather, they'd been together for about a year at this point. They were crazy in love. To this day, Rob is still in contact with Jennifer's parents. They're very close. Throughout all of this, Jennifer's parents have expressed a lot of worries for Rob about him moving on and finding someone else. So Jennifer and Rob were in a very loving relationship, but they did argue quite a bit over the whole long distance thing. It was difficult for both of them. So when and where they could, they would go away, spend time together, and on this occasion they spent a weekend in St. Croix. Jennifer was doing well for herself. She had graduated college 2 years earlier and she worked in finance from what I can gather, and she had recently actually bought herself her own condo, which for a 24-year-old is very impressive. So she was doing really well for herself. So whilst Jennifer was away in St. Croix with Rob, she let her younger brother Logan and 2 of his friends stay at her condo for the weekend. I suppose when you've got an older sister who has a place all to herself and she's away for the weekend, why not take advantage of that and go and stay in Orlando? I'm guessing maybe there's a nightlife there, maybe they just wanted some time away. So Logan and his 2 friends stayed at Jennifer's apartment for the weekend. So on the morning of January 23rd, Jennifer left Rob's place in Fort Lauderdale and drove straight to the office. So she would have left Fort Lauderdale probably around 5 or 6 a.m. Because she had to be at the office for, I think, from what I can gather, 8 a.m. She didn't stop at home on the way to the office, she just went straight there, and from what we can gather, the first time she went home that day was after she'd finished work at about 6 o'clock. And her leaving work on January 23rd was actually the last time she was ever actually seen alive. It wasn't the last time she was heard of, but it was the last time she was seen. That evening, as always, Jennifer made calls to her family. Her and her family were very close, and she would call them every single night when she got home from work. So she called, spoke to her mum and dad, and she spoke to Logan as well, and Logan told her that his friend had actually left his mobile phone in her condo and asked her if she could post it back. He asked her to overnight it, and from what I can gather on the phone, she said to him, okay, I'm not sending it tonight because I'm back at the apartment now and that's it, I'm just not going to send it tonight, but I'll send it tomorrow and it'll be with you in the next couple of days. She also spoke to Rob that night, and from what I can gather, her and Rob actually had a bit of an argument on the phone, of course, over the whole long distance thing. They just found it very difficult being apart all the time. It wasn't a massive argument, it wasn't like a breakup, falling out sort of thing, but from what I can gather, it was just like a bit of a bicker and about them finding it difficult being so far apart. And that was the last time Jennifer's voice was heard by anyone. From what I can gather, this phone call took place just before 10 o'clock that night. And this is where things start to get a little bit weird. At 10:40 p.m. that night, Jennifer's phone was turned off. Now, Jennifer used her phone as her alarm clock in the morning, so the fact that it was turned off is very strange. Also, Jennifer was very safety conscious. She took all of the precautions that a 24-year-old beautiful girl living on her own should take. She was very aware of her surroundings, and her parents said that it was very weird that she would turn her phone off because she had mentioned before that she didn't feel totally safe in her condo complex. And so she would keep her phone on and nearby at all times. Now, some sources I've read have also said that the extra mobile phone that Jennifer had, the one that belonged to her brother's friend, was also turned off about 10:40 that night, and apparently the batteries were removed from both phones as well. However, some sources I've read have also said that the phone ran out over the weekend. It just died because it hadn't been on charge for a weekend. So I'm not entirely sure what to believe there. Obviously, if both phones were turned off at the same time, that is incredibly suspicious. However, if like the other phone had just run out over the weekend, then that's really a non-issue. But of course, no mobile phones have ever been found, so they've never been able to verify this. Now, the next morning at work, Jennifer had a big meeting, quite an important meeting. She was very good at her job. Like I said, I think she worked in finance, and she'd only been there a year and she'd already been promoted, so she was very reliable, very efficient, she was very good at her job. So when she didn't turn up that morning, her colleagues started to worry a little bit. I think there was probably a protocol in place where if Jennifer hadn't turned up by a certain time, they had to try and contact her. They tried to contact her to no answer, so they waited, they still didn't hear from her. So they actually ended up contacting her emergency contacts, who were her parents. And her parents hadn't heard from her either since the phone call the night before. They immediately freaked out because this is so unlike Jennifer. Her parents immediately contacted the manager of the apartments that Jennifer lived in and asked him to go and check on Jennifer. So he lets himself into her apartment and everything is normal, but there's no sign of Jennifer. He also tells her parents on the phone that her car's gone as well. Her parents freak out and they get in the car and they drive down. They also get in contact with Logan, her brother, who gets in his car separately and drives down as well. Logan arrives at the condo first, and when he arrives he sees some workers sat in a van or a car just in the car park. So he goes over to them and he tries to ask them if they'd seen anything suspicious or if they'd seen Jennifer at all. Weirdly enough, he goes over to them and they refuse to make eye contact with him. They refuse to communicate with him in any way. They don't even roll the window down. When Jennifer's parents arrive, they go into the condo and they have a look around. Now, everything seemed to be in a pretty normal state. The shower was still wet. Her wet towels were on the floor, so it looked as if she had showered that morning before getting ready to go to work. Her clothes were laid out on her bed like she was trying to decide what to wear. Her phone, the extra phone that she was going to mail back, her car keys and briefcase and purse were all missing. So it just looked as if she had just gone to work, just got ready for work as usual and left the house. So although her apartment was in her very usual standards, what had happened between Jennifer leaving the apartment and getting to work, or leaving to go to work? Because clearly she never arrived at her place of work. But the fact that her car wasn't there as well was very strange, and her parents contacted the police and the police didn't actually do anything. They turned around and said Jennifer was an adult, if she wanted to go missing she could, and there was nothing they could do. And so Jennifer's family immediately leaped into action. By 5 o'clock that night they were handing out posters on the street asking, has anyone seen their daughter? Police didn't actually take any notice until later that night when they suddenly decided to jump into action. However, by the time they decided to do something, a lot of hours had passed. Nobody really knows what time Jennifer went missing, but it's assumed that there was at least 12 hours between her missing and the police actually deciding to do something. And those 12 hours would have been crucial in this case. And in that time, whoever either took Jennifer or murdered Jennifer has got away. Investigators theorised that Jennifer had got ready for work as usual in the morning, had walked out of her condo, locked the front door, and in the space between walking from her front door to her car, something's happened to her. Talking of her car, 2 days later, January 26th, her 2004 black Chevy Malibu is found about a mile away from her home. It had been parked at another condo complex, and police were so excited to realise that this complex was surrounded by cameras. There are at least 3 cameras, I think, facing the spot where the car was parked. This was going to be their big break in the case. They're finally going to see what had happened to her. So they get up the footage. Something to bear in mind with these cameras is they weren't video cameras. They're actually sort of photo cameras. They took a still photo every 3 seconds, so instead of just being one long continuous shot, it was just single photos. The surveillance video shows an unidentified person of interest dropping the car off. They sort of put the car into a space and like reversed out, then like drove back in, obviously trying to get the car straight. They clearly cared about the car being straight in the parking space. The person sat in the car for about 32 seconds before getting out and walking away. Yay, the police can see who the person is, right? Wrong. In the video footage, I'm going to put the clip in so you can actually see, the person's face is obscured by a fence in every single shot. And also at any point in this video do the police get a clear view of this person. The FBI were called in to analyse the photos, as well as NASA. NASA got involved because they had the technology to sort of really blow up the photo and see if they could get any like extra tiny minute details out of it. From what the FBI could tell, the person in this photo was between 5'3" and 5'5", most likely towards 5'5". So this was a short person. This obviously leads to the question, was this person a woman? Now I've looked at the video a lot and I personally don't think it's a woman from just the way the person's walking, their gait, like the size of their feet. I don't think it looks like a woman, but that obviously doesn't mean it isn't. The FBI have also said they can't say what gender the person is based on their height. Florida has the 3rd largest Hispanic community, or it did at this time, in America, and the average height for a Hispanic male, so I've read, is 5'5". So although this person is on the shorter side, it could possibly be a male, or it could be a woman, or just a very short white male. Like, there's honestly, the height doesn't really mean anything at all. It did not help with their investigation in the slightest. So of course, this unidentified person of interest is the prime suspect in this case. Only problem is they have no idea who they're looking for. The person in the video seems to be wearing white. To me, I think it looks like maybe like decorators overalls, or like just overalls of some kind. But lots of professions and lots of people wear white. Cricketers, for example, or bakers, people who work, butchers, anything like that. So although you would think an all-white outfit would sort of narrow the search down a little bit, it didn't really. And there's also the chance that the person in this video isn't the person who harmed Jennifer. There's a very good chance maybe somebody slipped a random person at 20 and said, hey, go park this car a mile away, and the person did just that, and they just got very, very lucky. So although this person is obviously a very interesting person in this case, who says it's the person who killed Jennifer, they're wearing all white. If whoever's done this has harmed Jennifer in any way, you assume there's going to be blood. Would they really harm her in all white? So have they got changed at any point? How soon after harming Jennifer have they taken the car and driven it away? Have they had a chance to change? Maybe they've gone into Jennifer's apartment and had a shower, which would explain the wet shower and the dirty towel. But I am assuming here that the police would have checked the apartment for forensics, maybe checked the shower, maybe checked the drain. And I'm assuming nothing suspicious came up there. So that's just speculation on my part. So like I said, when the car was parked, the suspect sat in there for about 32 seconds, which was enough time for them to wipe the car down. Because when forensics got there, they didn't really find any trace of DNA. They found one small DNA fibre and a latent fingerprint, which they weren't able to match to anything. It wasn't anything, it wasn't a full profile, they couldn't figure out anything, but that's all they have. A search dog was brought in on this case, obviously, and gave what I think, personally, is the most interesting piece of evidence in this case. The dog tracked a scent from the car parked a mile away back to the car park of Jennifer's apartment complex, which leads me to think that somebody has gotten out of the car and just walked back to the complex. Was it possibly a worker at this place that has done this? But I'll get back to that in a bit. It was quite clear to investigators very on that robbery wasn't the motive here. Jennifer's car wasn't stolen, it wasn't traded in for cash or anything like that. On the back seat of her car, she had one of the DVD players, which I'm assuming was a portable DVD player, which were very big around this time. And that wasn't taken, it wasn't stolen. None of Jennifer's credit cards since the day she went missing have shown any activity whatsoever. Robbery wasn't the motive. And this is where we're going to talk about some theories, some suspects. I'm just going to throw some ideas out there. First up, I want to talk about Rob, Jennifer's boyfriend. Rob was not a suspect in this case, even slightly. He lived 2 hours away, he had a strong alibi, he was at work, his cell phone records showed it pinging at towers in Fort Lauderdale at this time. There is no way that Rob could have been in Orlando at the time that Jennifer went missing. So Rob is just absolutely not a suspect at all. Jennifer's family are still in contact with him to this day. They've expressed a lot of concern for him over the years, and he was heartbroken by what happened to Jennifer. My favourite theory in this one is that it was a construction or maintenance worker at the condo complex that Jennifer lived at. Now, to sort of set the scene of this complex, it was a brand new complex from what I can figure out, and a lot of the condos still hadn't been rented out or sold to anyone, so a lot of the maintenance workers lived in these condos themselves. I think it was just like a work in progress. There were a lot of construction workers around at the time, and Jennifer had expressed to her parents that this made her uncomfortable. Jennifer was fluent in Spanish, and obviously a lot of the workers at this place were Hispanic, so she could hear, she knew what they were saying, she could understand them when they were making sort of jibes about her behind her back. They were saying things, obviously thinking that she couldn't understand, but she could. And it just made her very uncomfortable. They'd catcall her, they'd leer at her. Jennifer's parents obviously told the police this, and the police started to interview the people who were working at this apartment complex. However, I read that there were over 200 workers there at this time. A lot of them were possibly undocumented, and the police can't know full well if they got every single worker, if they interviewed all of them. If this was an undocumented worker that had done this, then they could easily have walked away and not been traced. Maybe they'd never told anyone their real name, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack. The police are not going to be able to find out who did this. So in all the workers the police interviewed, they never came across anyone of suspicion. Nobody ever gave anything away. So obviously it's not like this was a big group effort, 200 men did this to Jennifer. But you would think that if one person had done it, maybe somebody else would have a suspicion about another person possibly. And that just wasn't really the case. However, I do think it is most likely that a worker had done this to Jennifer. They knew her daily routine, they were there, and it would have been like convenient for them to just grab her. They obviously had been leering and making remarks at her, and the all-white uniform that the unidentified person of interest was in would have been something that these workers would wear, possibly a decorator. But like I said, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Another possible suspect is one of her brother's friends. I think he was called Matthew, one of the ones who was staying at the condo with Logan at the weekend that Jennifer was away. So it turns out that Matthew and Jennifer had dated previously. And Matthew was finding it quite difficult to get over her. The fact that Jennifer was away on holiday with her new boyfriend, I think he was finding it quite difficult to deal with. Now, I couldn't work out how serious they were dating. Were they just going on a few dates, or were they full on boyfriend and girlfriend? But Matthew apparently was quite upset about it. I did hear something about Matthew the night that Jennifer went missing, was about a mile away drinking at a bar and was like visibly upset, but I can't really source that, so I don't know how true that is, but figured it's probably worth mentioning anyway. The police obviously did interview him, but they completely cleared him. He had an alibi, and that was that. He was never a person of interest in this case. Now, the final suspect I want to talk about was a co-worker, somebody who worked with Jennifer called Johnny. Now, he had been making a lot of comments to her and made her very uncomfortable. Jennifer was a beautiful girl, so she got a lot of male attention. And from what I can gather, Johnny was actually married, but he would constantly ask her out and would show like visible distress when she would mention her boyfriend and things like that. And she'd spoken to her dad about him and asked her dad for advice. She was like, do I take him out for lunch and just like let him down gently? He knows I have a boyfriend, he knows I'm not interested, but he's making me really uncomfortable. I couldn't figure out from the sources if by this point Jennifer had sorted out with him, if she'd like had taken him out for lunch, or maybe just mentioned something to her colleagues and maybe they'd said something to him. I'm not sure if it was ever resolved, or if it was resolved how she did it, but he did make her uncomfortable. And on the day that Jennifer went missing, he actually turned up to work late, which is obviously crazy suspicious, but it turns out he had an alibi. He got stopped for speeding on the way to work, and then he'd argued with the police officer and actually ended up getting arrested. So I think that's a pretty strong alibi for the morning that Jennifer went missing. So it probably wasn't him. However, he did make a very odd comment a couple of days later. He was talking with some colleagues about Jennifer, where she'd gone, what happened, and he said in these exact words that she was likely eaten by the alligators already. Of course, it's Orlando, it's Florida, there are a lot of swamps and alligators are kind of everywhere. So it is a very big chance that if Jennifer had been murdered, she would have been maybe put in a swamp, put in a big body of water, and possibly eaten by the alligators. So this was a very odd thing for her colleague to say, and that was about it. I'm sure the police have like really looked into him, and I'm pretty sure he probably has an alibi, but I just thought that was very, very strange. And that's all we really have in terms of theories and suspects, and this is obviously all going off the theory that Jennifer disappeared that morning. She got up, had a shower, got ready for work, left her condo and walked to her car and then disappeared. It is also a possibility that Jennifer disappeared the night before. Maybe she did decide to leave her apartment and go and overnight this phone back to her brother because obviously he wanted it, or his friend wanted it. But there's nothing really to support that Jennifer did leave it the night before. If she did, obviously there's a whole other kettle of fish and there's a lot of other things you should look at. But her family said that Jennifer didn't like leaving her condo at night, and if she had done, I suppose the theories would be the same. Possibly construction worker, this co-worker that she was feeling comfortable around was obviously suspicious as well. But really there isn't anything. She just disappeared off the face of the earth. In all of these years, 11 years since Jennifer went missing, her parents have never said no to an interview. They do everything they can to try and bring their daughter back home to them. Her parents have been amazing. They have never given up hope at all. Obviously there's been no body, so this isn't a murder investigation, it's just a missing person case at this point. If she was killed, then chances are in Orlando, with that heat and humidity, there won't be much of a body left to find, maybe just some bones, which is just really sad. It's been 11 years. There's currently a $5,000 reward for any information that leads to Jennifer or Jennifer's body being found in this case. And on Friday, May 2nd, 2008, Florida House of Representatives actually passed a new bill. It was passed unanimously, it was a massive vote, and the bill was Senate Bill 502, the Jennifer Kesse and Tiffany Sessions Missing Person Act, meaning from that date onwards, when an adult goes missing in Florida, the police have the authority to jump into action as if it was a missing child's case. So although obviously no good comes out of Jennifer's death or Jennifer going missing, this is something positive that can come out of this horrible, horrible mess. And that is everything I have. Like I said, if you've got any extra information, please put it kindly down below and subscribe to my channel. I hope to see you next week. Mwah. Bye guys.